This is Chapter 4, Section 2, Introduction to Cells. Cells exist in a variety of shapes and sizes that suit their diverse functions. There are at least 200 types of cells, ranging from flat cells to branching cells to round cells to rectangular cells. Now, the next slide is going to be just lists of the different types of cells that are in the human body. So I want you to keep that in mind while you watch all of these many lists of types of cells come into the screen. Those are all the different types of cells that you have in your body. So again, all of these are just different types of cells, just lists. So you have to remember that the human body is made of about 100 trillion cells. And there are several hundred types of cells. Now, obviously, these are just 5 examples of different types of cells. And you can see from the picture that each of them is quite unique. They have very different shapes or structures because they have very different functions. So I want you to remember this phrase, form. Oh, okay, hold on. Apple pencil. Okay, does that work? All right, there we go. Oh, I hate that. Oh my God. Okay, so I want you to remember the phrase form follows function. Now, what that means is that the shape or the form of a structure in biology follows or is determined by function. So for an example, this thing on the side of your head called your ear, there is a reason that you have this on the side of your head rather than just having a hole in the side of your head. And that has to do with funneling or channeling the vibrations from the air into the ear canal. So a really good experiment to do is to take your hands and cup them behind your ears. You can see there, get my hair out of the way. You cup them behind your ears like that, and you listen, and you can see that this magnifies the volume of the sound dramatically. So imagine if you didn't, sorry, weird hair day. Imagine if you didn't have, this is called the pinna, P-I-N-N-A. This is the structure that's on the outside of your ear. It's not just for holding pretty earrings, but the main function is to direct sound, a lot like a satellite dish. So you know how the satellite dish is kind of like a cup shaped? That's what the ear is, kind of cup shaped. You see it, you got the ridge on the inside and the ridges on the inside of the ear that funnel the vibrations into the ear canal, because that's how we end up hearing things. So form follows functions. Not all cells are the same. In fact, many different types of cells have, as you see from the picture here, and I'll give you a couple of examples next, that the shapes and sizes vary greatly because of the very different functions that they have. So I'll give you a few examples. Again, form follows function. We have a red blood cell here. Now, the unique features of a red blood cell is that it has a biconcave shape. What that means is if you look at it, you can see here from the diagram, it almost looks like a donut without the hole. So if you look at it from the side, it looks like that. Terrible drawing, I know. But this, this curve here and here, that's called concave. And because there's 2 of them, it's called biconcave. Now, the advantage of having a biconcave shape instead of just a sphere is that it increases the surface area. Now, why would a red blood cell want a large surface area? Because its function is to carry oxygen. And the way that it carries oxygen, is that oxygen Oxygen has to go into the cell through the cell membrane, that outer barrier. So if you have a higher surface area, that means that you can absorb more oxygen faster. Also, one of the main topics for this whole unit is all of the organelles, all of the little tiny structures inside of a cell, and what each of their function is in relation to the whole cell. And one of those structures is something called the nucleus, but it also, like, basically when the red blood cell is formed, it has all of these structures on the inside, but then shortly after it's formed, they all disintegrate, they break apart, and they get broken down because let's say, for example, the nucleus contains DNA. A red blood cell doesn't need DNA because the function of DNA is to contain the instructions to make proteins. Red blood cells don't need to make proteins. Another organelle is something called the mitochondria. The mitochondria makes energy. The red blood cell doesn't need to make energy. It only needs to carry oxygen. So if you get rid of all of these structures on the inside of the red blood cell, you have much more room and stuff it full of hemoglobin, which is that protein that actually binds to the oxygen and carries it around. So in biology, the number one rule is if you don't need it, get rid of it because it's inefficient. Everything in biology, all of the structures are made to be as efficient as possible. If, for example, you see structures that are not efficient, they are most likely in the process of being eliminated through a process called evolution, which is a changing over time. And examples of that are wisdom teeth. Wisdom teeth, probably you might get them like in your late teens or early 20s, maybe. I think I was about 21 when mine started coming in. So we all have these teeth on the top and the bottom, right? And the very back teeth are called molars. Now, wisdom teeth are molars that come in your late teens or early 20s. But the problem is because human skulls have evolved, that our jaws have become smaller, we don't have room for wisdom teeth anymore. And this is why a lot of times, like I did, you have to go to a special surgeon and they have to cut the gum and physically remove the wisdom teeth because there's just no room for them. But the interesting thing is that some people in the population, they never come in. Some people, all four of them come in. For myself, I had two that were coming in, but the doctor just took all of them out at the same time anyway, since he was there. He's like, I might as well take them all out. So you can see based on that, because our jaws are smaller than they used to be, like hundreds of thousands of years ago. So we don't have room for that extra tooth that comes in later in life. So portions of our population still have it and portions of our population don't. So that's an example of something that's in the process of being eliminated through evolution. So my guess is that probably in another like 10 or 15 or 30,000 years, no human will have wisdom teeth at all ever. Just as a side. All right, so here's another example. This is a white blood cell. You saw that video in this animation in the last video when I talked about the white blood cell. So the video that you see in the right-hand side is a perfect example of what we call globular shape. It's basically just like a blob that can change shape, and you can see how it's like chasing the little tiny bacteria around. The other cells that you see here and here, here and here, those are red blood cells. These are actually, shoot, what do they call it? There's a specific disease where red blood cells have this kind of spiky shape. They're not supposed to have that. They're supposed to be nice and round and smooth. Oh, I can't remember. I've got a slide at school that shows that, and I cannot for the life of me remember what it's like, hematoxylin or something. Anyway, it doesn't matter. But the tiny little black dots that you see, where did they go? Here, those little tiny black dots, those are bacteria. So the white blood cell, this globular shape, is made so that it can squeeze through the walls of your capillaries, the really tiny blood vessels, because white blood cells are the ones that chase after pathogens or things that cause disease, viruses, bacteria, etc. So they have to be able to squish and squeeze their way through very tight spaces in your body because they have to be able to get anywhere in your body because, of course, we can have pathogens anywhere. Another unique property of white blood cells is that they are filled with enzymes. You don't find any other type of cell except for white blood cells that have enzymes. I should say the majority of the inside of a white blood cell is enzymes. Anyway, because the purpose of the white blood cell, of course, is to chase anything that doesn't belong in your body and attack and kill it with enzymes. And finally, here is a nerve cell. A nerve cell has many arms extending out for faster and better communication. So the analogy that I use is, imagine you live in a 30-story condo building. It has 30 floors. There's 4 condos on each floor. Now, let's say that there's only one internet line for the entire building, right? One line. So everybody has to share the speed. That's going to make it quite slow. Now, what happens if we increase the extensions or the lines and we give one floor one line? That makes it much faster, but it makes it even faster if we have one line per apartment, and even faster if we have like one line per person in the building. So the more extensions you have, the faster and the better communication. And of course, we all know just how fast our nervous system works just from, if we touch a hot stove, that our hand is almost removed before we even know what's happening. Okay, so that is the shapes of cells and how diverse they are. The second aspect of cells I want to talk about is their size. Some cells can be seen without a microscope. If you ever eat sushi and you get like the California rolls, let's see if I can find a picture of it. I'm sure you know what I mean. Right, so if you get, yeah, if you get sushi like that, all those little orange dots that you see, those are fish eggs. Okay, it's called roe, R-O-E. Sorry, just throwing my phone around. And so each of those little tiny orange dots is a cell. So you can see those with your eye, which is without a microscope. But most cells, okay, as an example of a giraffe nerve cell, most cells are between 10 and 50 micrometers. You don't have to remember that, but just understand it's really, really super small, and you can't see them without a microscope. Now, here's something that you really, really, really need to remember. The reason why cells are limited in size is because of the ratio between their surface area and volume. So I have a little bit of math here. Hopefully, it's not too complicated. It's okay for me, so it shouldn't be that hard. So if you look at the side length, we're going to start with the smallest cube. The side length is 1 millimeter. So if you calculate, if you calculate surface area, you end up getting 6, oh goodness. My Bluetooth just canceled on me. That's why my laser's stuck there. Okay, so for a it's not going away, interesting. For a 1 millimeter sided cube, the surface area is 6 and the volume is 1. So that's a ratio of 6 to 1. If you increase each side by just 1 millimeter, look what happens to the surface area to volume ratio. It is cut in half. So as the cell gets bigger, the surface area to volume ratio gets smaller. And the reason why that's important is because there comes a certain point where the cell doesn't have enough surface area for nutrients to be able to go in and waste to be able to go out efficiently enough that the cell stays alive. So we have 6 to 1, 3 to 1, and if we increase the size of the cube to 4 millimeters per side, it goes down to 3 to 2. So as a cell grows larger, at some point, its surface area is too small to allow materials to enter quickly enough for the cell to survive. So the really, really important part for cells is to have a large surface area compared to its volume. And you'll find as we study more and more in biology that quite often you find that things are folded. If you think about your small intestine, for example, your small intestine is about 8 meters long. And think about what a small volume that actually occupies, 8 meters, which is probably like more than 4 times your height, which is stuffed into this little bitty area of your belly because it's folded. And so in biology, when you see a structure that has folding, the first thing I want you to think about is surface area. So folding equals more surface area. You're going to see it a lot. Okay, now there are two basic types of cells that we can categorize. We have, as you see from the little GIF there, we have prokaryotes and eukaryotes. The fossil record suggests that the earliest life forms were cells that were actually similar to modern day bacteria, but now we divide them into two groups. We have prokaryotes and eukaryotes, and you can see that pro means before, karyo means nucleus, and eukaryotes, U means true, and karyo means nucleus. Again, like I said, everything in biology vocab is about what the different parts mean and putting the meanings together. So before the nucleus and true nucleus. So we're going to look at prokaryotes first. Prokaryotes lack or do not have a membrane-bound nucleus, nor do they have any organelles. And I know you don't know exactly what organelles are yet, because that's the whole point, that's the meat of this chapter. But just understand that organelles are all the little tiny structures inside of a cell that each have their own function. Very much like inside our body, we have organs like our brain, our liver, our heart, our lungs, all of these different parts inside our body. Each part has its own function, but on the whole, they cooperate together to allow us to live. Organelles do exactly the same thing, but on the cellular level. For prokaryotes, the DNA is concentrated in an area that we call the nucleoid. If you remember from an earlier video, I said the suffix oid means similar to. So a nucleoid is kind of a nucleus, but it's not really a nucleus because it's not surrounded by a membrane. It's just an area where you find DNA. There are two domains. If you remember from a previous video, I talked about there's 3 domains and 6 kingdoms that we classify organisms. So 2 domains of prokaryotes, we have bacteria and archaea. Bacteria in the 6 kingdom system is called eubacteria, and archaea is called archaebacteria. Archae means ancient, and eu, again, from the previous slide, means true. So eubacteria are all the modern day bacteria that we find. Archaebacteria are also called extremophiles. Phile means that you like it, and of course extremo is just like extreme. So these are bacteria that live in extreme environments. For example, the Dead Sea, which is like 30% salt, which really no organisms can exist in 30% salt. If you compare that to the regular ocean water is about 3% salt, but the Dead Sea is 30% salt, and the water is so dense that you literally you just float on top of it. You can look up videos on YouTube. It's pretty cool to watch people just completely just kind of sit on top of the water because there's so much salt in the water. Anyway, that's an example of an extremophile. Also, you find extremophiles that live like in the North or South Pole and under extreme low temperatures, or even at the bottom of the ocean next to the underwater vents, which are like 800 degrees Celsius. These are places where you find archaebacteria. So these are 2 of the 6 kingdoms. I know I'm throwing a lot of extraneous information at you, but why not? The other 4 kingdoms, we have Plantae, Animalia, fungi, and Protista. And I talked about Protista before. I don't remember where. I've been doing so many videos. But Protista are like the amoebas, the algae, everything that's not a plant, not an animal, not fungus. They throw it into Protista. In the 3 domain system, these 4 kingdoms fall under the domain if I could write properly. No, there we go. Eukarya. So 3 domains is bacteria, archaea, and eukarya. That's a more broad way of classifying life. And then underneath the 3 domain system, you have the 6 kingdom system where you have Plantae, Animalia, fungi, Protista, eubacteria, archaebacteria. Those are the 6 kingdoms of life. Okay. So this, sorry, my laser dot won't go away. But this is an example of a prokaryote. This is what we call the nucleoid. So you see that the DNA is concentrated in the center, but there's no membrane surrounding it. It's just kind of floating in the middle of the cell. Now, eukaryotes, which is the majority of organisms on Earth, eukaryotes do have a nucleus, which you can see here. And you see this bound by a membrane. There's a membrane that contains it. And they have membrane-bound organelles. So you can see all of these structures in here. They're all organelles. And the reason why it says membrane-bound is because if I go back here, this is something called a ribosome, which I'm going to talk about in another video next week. I'll start uploading individual videos for each organelle. But a ribosome is an organelle, but it's not surrounded by a membrane. So no membrane. Is just a cluster of protein and RNA. And 10b, you'll learn more about that in chapter 10, which is way far away. But that's the reason why we say for eukaryotes, we have membrane-bound organelles, because ribosomes are in prokaryotes, but they don't have a membrane. So organelles, what are they? Organelles are well-defined intracellular bodies that perform specific functions for a cell. Again, vocab. Intra means within. So within a cell. In chemistry, you learn intermolecular and intramolecular forces. Inter means between. So you think international, between two nations, between nations, not within one nation, but between nations. Intra means within, so one structure inside that structure. So organelles are intracellular, not intercellular. Intercellular would be from one cell to another cell. So here we have the prokaryote versus eukaryote. They both have a cell membrane, they both have DNA, they both have ribosomes, but a eukaryote has membrane-bound organelles. Prokaryotes don't. Okay, cell membrane, DNA, yes. Ribosomes, yes. Membrane-bound organelles, no.